gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for July 14th, for 2022, for the next hour or so. Let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, we are all PlayStation stars in the battle royale of life. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host for Game Mess Mornings. It's Imran Khan from Fanbyte, everybody. Hooray! How's it going, Imran?
Hello, I'm very glad to finally be here on Kind of Funny Games Daily again. It's been so long.
He wasn't looking. He wasn't looking. I stole it from him. He wasn't even looking.
Yeah.
I just went into his house and I stole this from him. I'm like, this is mine now.
It doesn't make sense for there to be two morning game news shows. So obviously,
well, there's only one. Theirs takes place at
yes.
the afternoon sometimes. So this is the only morning one. Yeah, exactly.
I am glad to be here. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Imran. I'm really glad to have you. You've been on vacation. Any vacation stories, or is it even better than that? And there are no vacation stories because you just laid perfectly still and did nothing for several days.
Basically, it's been that. So I'm
good.
on vacation from this past Monday to the end of the month because June was such a long month for me that I was working 60-hour weeks every week. And I was like, I'm just taking most of July off. By yesterday, I was bored. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to. I had Slack open and was actively trying not to look at Slack, but I was still, be like, hey, what everyone's talking about? Oh, they're making jokes in the channel. I'll throw in a couple of jokes as well. It was not the worst thing to do during a vacation, but it was close. So I'm trying to do my best today of being like, no, I'm not going to reply to any news today. I'm not going to, besides the show is fine. But I mean, after this, I'm not going to actually do anything work adjacent. And I still might, I did the thing that you're not supposed to do when you're bored, and I loaded up Game Pass and be like, oh, this looks interesting. So I've played about 5 minutes of 20 games.
Yeah, right. It never works, right? You get into a thing where you're spending more time setting stuff up, downloading it, and trying to get I'll create this perfect backlog that I'll then have to deal with and ignore or just come up with some sort of plan to tackle it, and then it's just this more stress in your life. At least that's how it works for me.
I played 5 minutes of Flynn the Crimson something. No, I played more than that. I played a couple of hours of it. It's fine. I don't know that I'd go it's beyond fine, but it's fine. It's totally fine.
I don't even know Flynn the Crimson something. What is that? I don't even know if I've heard of it.
It's a 2D action title where it's not a Metroidvania. It's a level-based game, but you get things to go back to old levels and explore new exits. I don't know that I would ever note it if it weren't on Game Pass, which I think is maybe the point of Game Pass. But yeah, it has nice 2D art. Something about the controls doesn't feel right to me, and I don't know exactly what it is.
Well, I hope you get more chances to relax and play games and do nothing on your vacation. But let's get into the game mess. Before we do, let's explain ourselves. Each weekday, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news, the catch-up, where we discuss the biggest topics consuming the lives of gamers everywhere, and maybe even bring some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input from a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. That's extra true today. Thank you so much, Imran. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. If you are watching on there, thank you so much. Hit that thumbs up. It helps people find the show. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into the morning mess. Starting with Nintendo to acquire CG visual content studio Dynamo Pictures. This comes from Chris Moyes at Destructoid. Nintendo has announced that it is currently in negotiations to acquire Dynamo Pictures, a visual content company located in Tokyo, Japan. Once the deal completes later this year, the CG-heavy studio is expected to be remonikered Nintendo Pictures and will produce content for Nintendo going forward. Nintendo has not specified exactly what role Nintendo Pictures will play in the future. Speaking in its public statement of intent, the legendary publisher succinctly states, Nintendo has decided to acquire 100% of the outstanding shares, excluding treasury shares, ooh, that's a tough one, treasury shares, of Dynamo Pictures, and make it a wholly owned subsidiary to strengthen the planning and production structure of visual content in the Nintendo group. So, Nintendo, I want to kind of get into the name because it reminds me of back when Square did Square Studios or Square Pictures or whatever, Square Movies or whatever. But I like those Pikmin shorts that I believe this studio worked on. I like them a whole lot, and I'm like, well, Nintendo should be doing more of that. It seems like they might do more of that, right?
Yeah, I get the feeling, and this is just a gut feeling. It's not based on most things, but like I get the feeling they're not super happy working with external partners on these games, and like that's a big part of Furukawa's current agenda. Is he wants to license out Nintendo stuff to keep Nintendo things in people's minds. So like the Mario movie is the crown jewel of that at the moment, but there's been rumors of like Adam Conover talked about a Star Fox show being tossed around at one point. The Zelda show was a thing that they apparently walked away from with Netflix. Like they seem to like the idea of we want to get these things in front of as many people as possible, but also not like the idea of somebody else having some sort of creative agenda or creative production leadership over these things. So it makes sense for them to buy a 3D studio and go, we're just going to make those ourselves. Where that doesn't make sense is that never works out. Like, nobody who does that ever really, like, benefits from it. Like, Capcom figured out a while ago, it doesn't matter if these things are good or not, they make us money.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that hasn't always succeeded, because I don't think Monster Hunter was a particularly big success for them, but Resident Evil was a boffo success for them. So they keep chasing that same, pardon the pun, dragon. But we'll see how Nintendo takes it, because like you said, the Pikmin shorts are entertaining. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm necessarily like jonesing for more of those things. I don't know if they produce like, let's say the thing in my head of if you make this, it would be a home run would be like Wind Waker shorts. But also, I don't like someone has to write that. Someone has to like produce that. And you have to have people who are willing to say, hey, your ideas are bad. Let's go back to, let's go back to the drawing board and figure this stuff out, which I don't know Nintendo has, especially if Miyamoto is the one who's doing these things. Mm-hmm. But who knows? In my head, when I first saw this story, I was like, oh, they bought a visual works style thing, like another Square Enix initiative, which would be beneficial to them, but I guess that's not what they're actually doing. They are, by all accounts, including calling this Nintendo Pictures, it seems to be the case that they are going to make some sort of shorts or movies or something, which, God bless them, I hope it works out for them, because it doesn't work out for most.
Yeah, it's I think the reason that those like Pikmin shorts are so entertaining, and maybe this like translates to the Yoshi and Poochie shorts that they did as like a bunch of like commercial promotions for one of those games. I think Miyamoto does get pretty involved in that stuff. I mean, I think obviously Miyamoto like did the storyboards for Pikmin, and like that was a big part of their content as well, showing off the storyboards he did. He can't be the person sort of overseeing every single piece of media that this Nintendo Pictures is producing. I mean, I suppose he could, but like not forever. And as they try to expand and do more stuff, is he going to be able to split up his responsibilities? And he already seems to be pretty intensely involved in what Chris Meledandri and Illumination Studios are doing. And they brought Meledandri to be one of the like external partners on the board of directors and stuff like that. So they're going hard toward this Hollywood partnership. So this is not them saying we're going to do movies, but I do think like that thing over there with the big, major motion pictures is going to take up a lot of the creative energy that Miyamoto probably would put into something like this. And so then, who do they put in charge? And if they put someone else in charge, will Miyamoto be sort of cool with it? Because it does seem like he wants anything that's like a visual medium that they approach these days. From the beginning, he seems to want to make sure it is just right. And I think, bringing it in, they probably have designs in their head of like, well, this is how we make sure everything is just right. I think there's also a possibility like, there is still a ton of thirst from major streaming platforms to get as much content on those platforms as possible. Video games have been a pretty fertile ground for these companies finding animated stuff and other things they can put on there. And that's not just the Resident Evil show is like launching on Netflix this week or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not just like the biggest names in gaming. It's also like Costume Quest has a cartoon on Prime Video. It's the entire spectrum of gaming could end up being like content. And if Nintendo is like, hey, we will do this, but we need to produce this ourselves, I could see them using Nintendo Pictures to produce 15 to 30 minute cartoons of some of their stuff to put on Netflix, put on Amazon Prime Video, stuff like that. It seems like this is like, okay, while Illumination is doing the big movies, we will do these shows ourselves. And that way we could still have that control while we trust Meledandri and everyone over Illumination, at least for now. We'll see what happens once that movie comes out and if they still trust Illumination then. But yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I think the wise thing for them to do would be not to use this thing for like its own separate independently existing content, but to be, hey, if you're going to run a Mario movie in a theater or a Zelda movie or whatever, here's a short to play before it.
Yeah,
here's
that's almost certain to happen, right?
Yeah, do you like Mario? Meet Pit, motherfucker. Like, do this little Kid Icarus thing or a little Pikmin thing or something that reminds you these lesser known things that are not Mario, Zelda, or what have you exist.
Here's a truly obscene Waluigi short. Deal with it, children and families. I'm down.
Just signs posted on theater. Be warned, the Waluigi short before the movie is disturbing to many viewers.
That's right. Yes. God, what movie did they do that with? There was that the warning for that Frozen short for a long time.
Yeah, that lasted 30 minutes. That everyone was like, "What the fuck is this? Why are we watching this thing?"
There is a very long short before this. God, that's funny. You pointed out, and I think correctly, that these things don't usually end up working, and we talked about some of the reasons. But like in the past, like the Square effort, and that's from like what 30 years ago now, 25 years ago. It's forever ago now. But still, like it doesn't seem like the landscape has changed all that much in terms of what you need to make these things work. It just seems like video game companies have their core competencies, and they try to bring that same creativity to making a film. And it just doesn't translate. Do you think that's what it is?
I think it is very easy to look at the landscape of Hollywood and the way it is to make a movie and think, hey, if Zach Braff can do this, why can't I? Like, why can't a producer that like that already has like if Zach Braff can pull off that beard, which he can't, why can't anyone else? But like it's a thing of we have all this money, we have a lot of creative juice and talent, we have a lot of competency in production. Why couldn't we put out a movie? And it's like, because so much of it is momentum based. If you know how to produce a movie, then you're already working in Hollywood, you're already working at Paramount, you're already working with those big studios.
You already have those relationships. Absolutely. Yeah.
And like the fact that so many big movies come from, or so many absolutely fucking terrible movies come from big names with lots of money. I was thinking the other day about The Last Airbender, how that came from a director who had some big hits and a production company that wanted to give them $250 million to make 3 movies, and it still ended up being a giant bomb, so to speak. Like it is a much harder thing to actually do than it is to look at. Yeah. And I think that is why publishers like Capcom go, we'll pair with people who know how to do it. They know how to make this work. We don't want to be the second you start going, this wouldn't work because is not how we would do it in video games, is when that thing falls apart, because those are different creative endeavors entirely.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Let's move on to Sony announces PlayStation Stars, a loyalty program for gamers. This comes from Shannon Lau at the Washington Post. Sony is adding a free rewards and loyalty program for gamers called PlayStation Stars. The program will launch later this year, the company said, though specific details about a release timeline remain under wraps. Players can use PlayStation Stars to earn rewards through completing tasks called campaigns, such as spending time on a particular title or working toward in-game achievements. It will be the first rewards program for the 27-year-old brand. Here's a quote. We really feel like this is just the best time to be launching this type of program. In terms of us having the healthiest player base, the PlayStation 5 obviously is a huge success, and we really wanted to do something that can honor and celebrate PlayStation's history, and now's the best time to do so. That comes from Grace Chen, Vice President of Network Advertising, Loyalty, and Licensed Merchandise, in an interview with the Washington Post. We wanted to create a program that honors the journey and the role that PlayStation may have had in someone's life. We wanted to do that in a way that only PlayStation can. What do you think it takes, like Imran, at a company like Sony to get an initiative like this off the ground? Because it feels like one of those things that's like probably been brought up a million times in meetings, and it's probably like, yeah, we could do that, but is it that a little bit hokey? We're a premium brand. People should just want to come to us for our products. Do you think that's the kind of conversation they have? And then one day they're like, listen, this is going to move the needle for a certain audience by like 3 to 5%, and that makes all the difference these days. Do you think that's sort of the arc this sort of thing takes?
I think yes, but also the larger arc of the industry has been, how do we get people to be more loyal to our specific brands?
Yes.
And like Xbox figured that out about 2-3 years ago. Like, okay, if we just make sure people, like, not even when I say loyal, I don't mean the rabid console fanboys that are just like they
Right,
word
that
search the
is.
word Xbox or Kratos or whatever and yell at everyone who says something they don't like. I mean, like the people who go, I've always been PlayStation. I've always loved Kratos. I've always loved blah blah blah, and then love to because they're already PlayStation Rewards members when it comes to time for the PS6 or the PS5 Pro or something like that. They go, yeah, I should probably get this because one, it'll add points. Two, I have so many points. Three, like there's no option. I was not in the Xbox Rewards program from day one. I am on day one from this, so it'll be more beneficial to me. Like you said, it's a small audience. It's like 3 to 5%, but 3 to 5% could be millions and billions of dollars at some
Right.
point. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that they are. If you don't want to do the multiple subscription programs or what they are doing, or you don't want to do like something even more hokey than this, it makes sense to go, let's associate people with our brand in a way that they like and is unintrusive to their everyday life. They are only benefiting from this. I expect after today, most people won't talk or care about
Yes.
this program, but the people that do will be like, hey, I got 3 years of PS Plus just by, beating God of War and Horizon in 1 year or something.
We like. I don't ever really think about Microsoft rewards all that much. I think I might be earning them because I use Edge, and so in the background, I occasionally do a Bing search and stuff like that. And so I think I have a lot of points. And I think I actually just gave like $1's worth of points to Wikipedia the other day because the Bing or the Edge browser's like, you just want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I guess I don't really care. Yeah, sure. Here's $1. But occasionally, you're right. You do hear that person who's like, I'm all in on that stuff. I got like my last several years of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate by just using my Bing rewards or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, that seems fine. Yeah. The one I really like is My Nintendo because it is just so passive. It happens in the background, and occasionally I will get some points to get stuff. But the thing I really like is the golden coins that you get. Which seems like the right way to do a loyalty program. And that's the right way to do stuff for like digital ownership too, because you can't trade those games in. But as you buy digital games, you get these digital coins that you could then use just as pennies to buy other games. And I occasionally look, I'm like, oh, I have like $15 worth of just currency here. Kind of the equivalent if I went to GameStop with a bunch of games and traded them in. I got $15 to put towards a game. That gets me back in the eShop and spending a little bit more money. Like that seems... That's like loyalty toward me. So like the direction is kind of what it feels like. Like I don't have loyalty to this brand. This brand's like trying to like encourage me to come back. And I think that's what all these programs are obviously really about, is just kind of keeping you engaged and spending that money in that cycle.
Do you remember the Wii U? Like if you bought the more expensive version, you got like 20% off every game for like 2 years.
Yeah.
It was like a cool thing.
Yeah,
like,
that's right. Oh my,
Wii U.
I forgot about it till you mentioned that was weird.
Huh. It was like I wish more people would. I wish Nintendo would do that again. But like,
right.
And also there was that voucher program that they I think still have going in Japan, but they cut off in like everywhere else.
Right. To buy like you can just buy the 2 vouchers for like a discounted price up front, and then you use them in whatever game. I did that, and I think you could only do it once here, right? Because I also would have done it again.
It was a very specific like time limited program here. I think they still have it going in Japan, or they did for at least a lot longer than we did. But like, it's stuff like that where if I feel like I'm saving money somehow, then hell yeah, I am on board with whatever program this is. But if it's like, if this Sony campaign feels more like work than it does like a coupon, then I'm probably going to be like, okay, I'll sign up and then just never think about it again. But like the person you mentioned of they paid for their Microsoft Game Pass for using Bing, I think that kind of person is not going to go to the next Xbox and next PlayStation and going like, I don't know which one I want. They're going to go Xbox.
Yes, they're already bought
Sony is looking. Yeah, Sony's looking for that kind of customer basically.
Resident Evil 2 Remake has sold a massive 10 million copies. Capcom Company Limited today announced that the multi-platform title Resident Evil 2 has shipped over 10 million units worldwide. Released in January 2019, the Resident Evil 2 is a reimagining of the original. The title garnered critical acclaim from international media, lauded for providing a fresh horror experience. It is the kind of thing where, oh yeah, this game just is going to keep selling, and that 10 million mark is the like new big blockbuster line, right? Because for me, it's like I remember when I was doing MPD every month, I would look for if a game launched ahead of Grand Theft Auto. That was like my first indicator. Grand Theft Auto 5. If you sold more than Grand Theft Auto 5 in your first month, that's the first indicator that you're on to something. And then down the line, it's like, okay, if you're still in the top 10, top 20, and then if you ever get to 10 million, then you are one of the, just a handful of games that really get to that line. Resident Evil 2 getting there, I'm not too surprised, but this is a big, like previous Resident Evil games have not hit that mark, I don't think, right? This has got to be the best-selling Resident Evil game.
I would have to check, but I'm sure it's probably the best-selling remake, if nothing else. It is. Oh, yeah. That number in my head, I have to check. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe it outsold 7, obviously outsold 8, but 8 is still like relatively new in comparison. Yeah, it is. I think the best-selling Resident Evil of the last decade, most likely. Probably does not count all the permutations of 4. I'm just thinking
maybe all the permutations of 4, exactly. Like that's the one that could have done it, I think. Yeah,
but it is ridiculous. It is in some ways the best case scenario for Capcom, where they currently have multiple styles of Resident Evil that are just all selling very well. Village sold very well. The action Resident Evil 6, I think if we go back, is actually the best selling Resident Evil game. But this might beat it. But they have that action style Resident Evil game that they can in their pockets they can always go back to, and they probably will a little bit with 4 remake, whatever they want to call it. And then they have this, like, for lack of a better term, slower, spooky Resident Evil that is also doing gangbusters that they can just pull out of their pocket whenever they need to. So they have like these multiple games that honestly I'd bet most of the customer base for 2 never played the original. They can just go and say, okay, well, we heard you. We're bringing back the old style Resident Evil in this form. So we know famously or infamously they've skipped over Code Veronica. I suspect that Code Veronica is probably going to be the next Resident Evil 2 style remake game.
Right.
Not next as in like the next game coming, but like a game down the line that will.
Right, the 3 team has probably moved on to something like that, while the 2 teams doing 4, right? That seems right.
Yeah. That makes the most sense. And meanwhile, the 8 team they've got that DLC, which the DLC for Village is also looking kind of like Resident Evil 2 because they've added a first person option, or I'm sorry, a third person option. So I suspect that they got various irons and fires, and all of them will be very successful. They don't talk a lot about 3's sales or 3 remake, so that one I think has been the only like misfire so far. But 3 had more problems than like style. It was on a game. It was too fast, too quick after the last one, and like not a full remake. So a lot of people who even were on board this kind of thing were like, I don't know, word of mouth isn't great. Resident Evil 2's word of mouth was fantastic. So I imagine they've learned at least enough lessons from how they release these games to get it on a better pace from now on.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Propaganda Panda in the chat helped me out here. This is from Statista, which I think is like a crowdsourced thing, but this is probably correct. Resident Evil 7 was the best selling, and it, according to this, at the time of this posting, it was at 10.6 million. And then Resident Evil 2 Remake was right behind that with like 9-ish million. So now it's at 10 million. Resident Evil 4, I'm like, yeah, with all the permutations, I'm like, okay. But when it launched, it was limited to the GameCube, and that initial launch probably like held it back a little bit over time. Where it was never really going to catch up with this stuff. Although the remake almost certainly going to be probably the new best-selling Resident Evil game going forward. Let's see if I can bring this in here for everybody. So let's allow all cookies. There you go, everybody.
It's a confusing site because like it shows Resident Evil 5 at the bottom and also at the 3rd best-selling game.
Yes, exactly. So maybe this stuff is not super reliable, but I think in general, I remember here Resident Evil 7 was like a huge success as well. So yeah, this sounds fair. All right, let's get back here. TMNT, speaking of sales, Shredder's Revenge has sold 1 million copies in a week. This is by Zach Swisen at Kotaku. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge was released last month across multiple platforms and to widely positive reviews. Now the studio behind the retro-inspired arcade beat-em-up has shared the news that TMNT Shredder's Revenge sold 1 million copies in just its first week. And then Zach adds, impressive as shell. So there you go. Deal with that, everybody.
I know Zach personally. He is like that.
Yes, he is like that, absolutely. This is like the least surprising thing to me. This game seemed like it took over. There wasn't a lot of other stuff coming out in terms of like what might have taken the oxygen out of the room for this thing. It just hit. It hit hard, and everyone was playing it. it is worth pointing out, and Zach does so. This came out on Game Pass as well on day one. So if you didn't want to buy the game, you had the option to play it without buying it. But still, it has sold 1 million copies. It's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah, and like it's kind of Cuphead also sold 1 million copies in like the first couple of days. So like indie stuff
That's
is still
right.
doing well. Like, and granted, these are two very big indie games. They're very notable. These were at like Summer
The
Game
anomalies.
Fest and like
Absolutely, yes.
So like it's obvious that they are doing well because they got a lot of marketing and attention, but they're doing well because they're good games too. And I think this is this probably has Konami looking like, why the hell didn't our Turtles in Time thing do well? It's because that game wasn't good. Turtles in Time in general, good. That remake wasn't good. So I think this does send a more important message of, if you're going to nostalgia bait, the actual game has to be like quality as well. And .mu and like God, I forgot the rest of the parties involved in this, but there's so many.
God, trophy or something. I can't remember now. Yeah. I want to say treasure, but that's not right.
Yeah, they do very good work. Like
tribute games. Thank you, Big.
Tribute games, yes. Streets of Rage 4 was like one of the best brawlers of the last like 10 years, honestly.
Right.
And so like Shredder's Revenge is also incredibly good. If you keep putting out games like this, they're going to keep doing well. And I hope that's the message they take away from this, that you need more than just the licensing hook. I imagine there's other, like, I imagine if you're .mu in Tribute, the thing you're looking at right now is, what if we call up John Drake and go,
yeah,
there should be a new X-Men brawler.
X-Men, Simpsons. You could talk the one call. You could take care of all that.
John Drake, call .mu and see what you can get. I've already bothering John Drake.
John Drake knows this. Yeah.
Yep. So like most of my complaints to John Drake are completely joking. This one should be a thing that happens.
Yeah, I think that this could be a joke, but I think he knows, like, he's good at this stuff. John Drake, exactly. So I completely agree that like this is the kind of thing it should happen. I mean, that X-Men show, the '90s cartoon, is getting some sort of new season or something, or like a return on Disney Plus. Yeah. Come on. We should not be in a situation where we don't have a video game to capitalize on that. Shredder's Revenge. Now, to be fair, Shredder's Revenge, they does seem like they took their time with it. They kept kind of seemingly like, without confirming the date ever, it seemed like they just pushed it back a little bit. And now it seems like they're also doing that with the Cowabunga collection, which I think is not involving any of these companies, but still Konami. Maybe they were like looking to see how well this game was going to sell. And they're like, well, it sold really well. People are probably going to be pretty hyped for the Cowabunga collection. We should probably make sure it doesn't suck. I wonder, does Digital Ocean, Digital Clips, are they doing that? Maybe. But either way.
They're on Cowabunga Collection.
Well, then never mind. It's going to be fine. But yeah, so they haven't confirmed a date yet for that. So I'm like, I wonder if they're like, hey, let's just see how this does. And then maybe we can ride the sort of storm of this game coming out. But yeah, I totally agree that this is a genre that has found its footing in 2022 in a way that it felt, 5 years ago, felt like we would probably only ever get a handful of beat 'em ups every once in a while. And they would mostly be either these little indie games that a studio just put out because they wanted to be like Castle Crashers, or they'd be some cheap movie tie-in. And I think we've seen with Streets of Rage 4 and this now. This is a genre that can survive and thrive as long as it gets the right amount of attention. And everyone going in, the people making it and the people playing it, kind of accept it for what it is. A game you're going to beat in a couple hours, replay, have a good time with friends, and that's totally fine. That's totally viable.
Yeah. When Streets of Rage 4 came out, it felt like they were making a game as if the brawler genre had been like inundated with great games for 10 years. And like they were making a game that was competitive with the best of them, and there was nothing before that. Now it feels like there's actually a bunch of brawlers that are worth taking inspiration from and worth competing with.
Yeah. And real quick, Streets of Rage 4 was .emu as well, but Lizard Cube and Guard Crush Games did development on that. Guard Crush, I think, did that like rotoscope looking, the really cheap looking beat 'em up that had a really good fighting system, but it was like just pictures of their friends and different poses, and then that would be like the animation for it. It's worth checking out on Steam if you ever get a chance, everybody. Valve announces the first Steam VRfest. This comes from Greg Spinfell at GameSpot. Steam VRfest will bring demos and discounts to your headset from July 18th through the 25th. It's essentially a version of Steam Next Fest with a VR focus. The news came via Steamworks documentation, so Valve has yet to release marketing material across any other official channel. Any VR title is eligible to participate in the event. Like other similar promotions on Steam, discounts are not required to have your game featured. I put this in here because I'm like wondering what you think is Steam's position vis-a-vis VR following the success of the Steam Deck, and yet before the release of PlayStation VR 2. They're in this spot where it's like they could decide to continue to double down on VR, but they have an excuse to bail from it if they wanted to. It doesn't seem like they're going to. I'm not suggesting they want to, but what do you think like that position is for Valve?
Valve always holds their hardware at this weird like arm's length where they're like, hey, we got this thing. We made this thing. You can buy this thing. We will support it. Like, if you want games for this thing, there will be so many games that are on it. But then they're always like, but also our hands are real slippery, so if it falls out of our hands, we're not going to do anything with it. And like, the Steam Deck is the most I've ever seen them commit to something, but it's also the least they have to commit to something, because it is just a platform for which to play other games. It's not to say they're not doing work with it, but you know, it's that Valve thing of being like, I wonder when you guys are going to get tired of this thing.
Right.
When I loaded up Steam yesterday to check out my Steam Deck order, I saw that like the initial page had the, hey, we still have a VR headset. If you want to buy that VR headset, we still have it. But I think the initial pitch they probably had for that of, we're gonna be the go-to headset for the mass market, was undercut by how expensive it is, but also they almost certainly did not see Facebook making the Quest like are accessible with just a cable.
Yes.
Like that is by far the cheapest option, and by far the most mainstream option is,
yes,
I have a USB-C cable, I have a Quest, I've tried it. It works really well. I've played Half-Life Alyx using that thing. I did not buy their expensive $800 headset to do it. So there is a sense of a rising tide lifts all boats. So they are almost certainly doing better sales of VR games because of this thing. But it also means that they're not necessarily making a ton of profit on the hardware itself, which maybe they built in the fact that they don't need to. Maybe the people who did buy a Steam headset don't actually, like, they have paid for the R&D and research for it already.
Right.
I expect a PSVR 2 is going to help the market, because stuff that goes there is eventually going to go to PC and is eventually going to be compatible, or eventually going to be on Steam in some way. But we'll see. I think Sony wants to go into this one fairly hard, because I think they themselves are caught off guard by how successful the PSVR 1 was. So this one, they're willing to, like, the reason they're talking about it early, and the reason that they're like taking their time with it, is because they want software to be ready and available, and not just have those long droughts that there were with the first game, our first headset. So that software, assuming it's not all Sony published, is going to eventually come to Steam, and they're going to get, or Valve will get their bite at it too, which I suspect is, if not their plan B, then at least something that they have built into the idea of their VRfest and their VR initiatives.
Right. They definitely seemed like a leader in the space, even as Meta was selling more headsets, and PlayStation VR was selling more headsets and stuff like that. So it felt like Valve was positioning itself to be like crucial to anyone's future endeavors in VR. It seems like they still want to maintain that, even though I don't necessarily know if they're gonna, like, I know they patented a new headset in 2021. I don't know if they're ever gonna release another headset. If they do, it'd probably be a lot more like the Quest 2 than the Index. It'll probably be something in between. Probably be a little bit more expensive. Probably will have a cable like that is bundled with it, but then you can maybe play it wirelessly. I don't know. But I also think you're, in general, you're right. Like, when do they get bored? I don't think there's any chance of them getting bored with the Steam Deck anytime soon. The way that people buy games in droves once they purchase that thing, and the way that they've supported stuff like Elden Ring by going in and personally working on the Proton layer to make sure it runs even better than it does anywhere else. That stuff's like, okay, they are super invested in this thing, but I don't get the same sense from VR. Even though when you look at the Steam charts. And while the Steam Deck's number one right now, for months and months, it was the number one, like, number one best-selling thing by dollars was always the VR headset, the Valve Index. Even then, it's like, well, yeah, the thing is $900. If like 10 people are buying it, it's probably going to be on that chart. So I suppose we'll see. I want to see what happens with this festival, see if they come out of it strong, if they announce anything. They still have not announced Half-Life Alyx going anywhere except for PC. I suppose that's something they could still do with Sony once they fully do the blowout for PSVR 2. But I still expect that to happen.
who approaches who on that one? Like,
Yeah.
do you think Sony goes to Valve and be like, hey, why don't you put Half-Life Alex here? Because Valve is like, they're very intermittently
Right.
supportive of consoles. Like, they made a big deal about Portal 3 on PS3 way back in the day, and then kind of
Portal.
nothing until Portal Collection like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So it like they're not against the idea clearly, but I do wonder. I wonder if like I said Portal 3 instead of Portal 2. They I could see them or Sony approaching Valve, but I can also see Valve going to Sony being like, "Hey, we can help you make
Yeah.
a bigger deal of PSVR 2 by porting this game that has not been ported elsewhere because they couldn't do it on the original PSVR." And that does help them too. Like, it also, I feel like, comes down to what does Valve want to do, which is a question that I've been asking for like the last 5 years, and I'm not sure what their overall agenda is besides kind of just being a store that sells things.
Yep. And I mean, that's, it, you know, they talk about it. It's so easy for someone to decide to go work on the store because they can make something, they can make a product for the store that launches in a month and makes a huge amount of money. And then they get all these bonuses. And if you go to work on Half-Life 3, that is years and years, and there's no guarantee it's going to come out. And that kind of just creates this cycle where no one wants to go work on it. And they still have that flat structure where that's mostly how it works. So, yeah. EA makes Mass Effect and Dragon Age DLC free on Origin. This is by Tom Ivan at VGC. Electronic Arts has reportedly made a range of Mass Effect and Dragon Age DLC free on Origin ahead of its plan to discontinue its BioWare Points currency. Most DLC for Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 3 that was previously only purchasable with BioWare Points is now available free, according to an email being sent to players and reposted on Reddit. One exception is Mass Effect 3 multiplayer packs, which will still be purchasable with BioWare Points until the currency is discontinued on October 11th. Imran, I had forgotten about BioWare Points. These are they're basically like early Xbox points, right? Where it's just a digital premium currency that you bought, and then you would buy them like packs of 1,200, and then you'd get the thing, and the thing would be like 1,300 points or something like that. So you're like, well, now I got to buy another pack of 500, and now I have leftover points and stuff like that. This was always a dirty trick by the industry to like make you feel like you had to spend a certain amount of money, and then once you have it, you don't even consider it money anymore. I remember like going to panels in the early days of like mobile gaming and hearing gurus talk about how they were going to create this you have to have a digital currency so people don't think about how they're spending money. I'm like, well, that's not great. Don't do that. The industry has mostly shied away from that stuff, and yet we still had BioWare Points. So I don't know. Nice that they're finally getting rid of these things, huh?
Yeah, EA was really back then were the leader of like dumb bullshit for this sort of thing.
Yes.
Like, I remember the one time I've ever used BioWare Points was because I own Mass Effect 2 on PC, and if you wanted Shadow Broker, you had to buy them in BioWare Points. So I have but you can't buy the exact amount. You could only buy like a set of BioWare Points and then spend less of it on Shadow Broker. So I almost assuredly have a leftover amount of BioWare Points that will never do anything, will never go anywhere, that I have paid for, that, will effectively be worth nothing soon, which is fine. They should never have been in the first place. But yeah, EA used to do that. They used to do Project $10. I remember in Dragon Age, there was a guy in your camp who was literally just saying like, hey, buy the DLC. Like, that's all he really said.
Like Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, but in Dragon Age or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm glad they're getting rid of it. I know it like a decision like this could not have been made quickly, so I know it is not a reaction to this, but I wonder, I don't wonder, I think it's funny that like they're doing this the same week Ubisoft said, hey, we're not going to support Ubisoft's points whatever anymore. All that old Assassin's Creed content is just gone.
Yep.
And like here they're saying none of this is gone, you just have it for free, except for the multiplayer, which you don't talk about anymore, but for everything else, you just go ahead and take it. It's not going to make us any money anymore.
Right. And okay, so we are in a situation in the wider overall economy where a lot of companies are having a lot of concerns about the future and like how they are going to be able to maintain their revenue. I get the sense that these companies, Ubisoft and EA, make like the reason they pull the trigger on these decisions after probably considering them for a very long time is they probably have other things in the works that they are going to launch soon. to try to get more money out of people. And having BioWare points, this vestige of a previous age of trying to do that, is like would create this bad optics. So like, let's drop those completely. Let's just wash our hands of it. And now let's prepare to launch some other new scheme that is going to come out to try to squeeze every last dollar out of players. Maybe I'm on the wrong track there, but that's the sense I get. What do you think?
You mentioned like the 10 million number being like the big milestone number for AAA games at this point. In companies like EA and Ubisoft, honestly, specifically EA, they don't greenlight things anymore, or single player games, if they don't sell 10 million copies. Like they're not likely to sell 10 million copies. So the market has largely moved past the monetization schemes of the old buy a bunch of DLC, buy our BioWare points that you're not going to fully spend. Those are like on the shoulders of the Apexes and the Fortnites and stuff like that now.
Yep.
Those are for the live service games that are not for the single player games, which means that the single player games that they release now they have to all hit. That all of them have to hit, otherwise they're not worth it. The littered bodies of games that have been canceled at EA would stagger your mind. Like for people like you probably know a lot of them, but like there have been so many games that got very far and EA went, this isn't going to sell 10 million copies, and then killed it. And it
creates that toxicity at those environments too, because people have to be like, they basically have to lie and say, no, this is how this game's going to sell 10 million copies. And it creates all this like internal fighting between like the people doing analytics inside of these companies versus the studios trying to just get their game made. And then the people at the top are just, kind of rubbing their hands, being like, yes, fight until you come up with something that makes me a lot of money. It's devious.
The I guess like the executive experience and knowledge, the institutional knowledge of we need to monetize these games long term, or they have to sell 10 million copies, is coming at odds with the market reality of, okay, only a few games get to do that. Only a few games get to either reach 10 million or monetize long term.
The Last of Us Part 2 just hit like 10 million after going on discount. Like that's one of the biggest games in the world, and it's just not viable for everything. Yes.
I don't think it even outsold Luigi's Mansion, honestly. Like,
no,
and that's not to say Last of Us 2 like compared to that game, but like there's not that many games that do that. And I think they are still trying to figure out, how do we create a world where people tell us they want this thing? Some games reach it, some games don't, and we have no fucking clue what those games are going to be.
Right. It's very easy to get into a thing where you are in that environment where you're so risk adverse that you just end up barely making any games. And let's look at EA. Let's look at Activision. Are they making a lot of games? No, they're just not. They've been scared too. EA has sort of begun trying to. It feels like they're trying to steel themselves. They're trying to gird their loins over at EA to be like, okay, no, let's make Dead Space. Like Capcom is having success. Let's just do what they're doing. And Respawn has had success. Let's just make everything work like Respawn. Vince Zampella, do you want to just run everything, I guess? Like, okay, yes. Like, so they come up, they do have like plans, but it's like, it is very much based on like after years of being very risk adverse and being scared to try anything. Now they're like, well, we have to try something. We have to find some growth. And that's like kind of this small tiptoeing forward of trying to figure that stuff out. I have Japan's physical charts for week 27 of 2022. This is for July 4th through July 10th. Let's see, the software sales chart, Monster Hunter Rise plus Sunbreak, #1 again, 44,000 copies. Nintendo Switch Sports, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Ring Fit Adventure, and then Klonoa Fantasy Reverie fill out the top 10, or top 5, excuse me. Ring Fit Adventure is north of 3 million copies, 3.2 million copies now. Let's see, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 4.7 million total. Nintendo Switch Sports at 550,000 copies sold. Klonoa Reverie is the for like only new game in this top 5, 9,000 copies sold. And that's pretty good for that though. It's one of those games where it's like, it could have come and gone, but at least it like cracked the top 5. It outsold Kirby barely. Kirby is at a total of 785,000 copies, but that last week it sold 8,864 copies. So, let's see, in hardware, Switch OLED, Switch and Switch Lite have sold 26,000, 25,000, and 14,000 units respectively. PS5 was at 12,469. The PS5 Digital, 892. The PS5 Digital continues to be very hard to find anywhere. And then Xbox Series S was at 4,435 units, while Xbox Series X just 509 telling you that thing must be, even though, usually when that one is in stock in Japan, it sells around like 5 to 10,000. So it must just not be in supply there. And then the new 2DS LL, 200 units. So good for it. Man, I wonder if do they still have new 2DS LLs in Japan? I wonder if I should just import one of those. Probably should.
I see them like when I go to a Best Buy. The rare situations in which I go to a Best Buy, there's like new 2DSs on display and like in the thing. So I guess people are still buying them. Like if you want a long-term 2DS to, let's say, hack, then probably not. Though I don't know. Don't trust me on that. That it's like hackable, but
yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
In terms of hardware, it's a nice little piece of hardware.
Yes, I agree, and it's the used 3DSs of all stripes are pretty expensive already. So, yeah, if you can find one new for retail price, that's pretty exciting. All right, let's get to the catch up. Final Fantasy 16 ditched turn-based combat to appeal to a younger generation. This is from the producer. Let me just read some of this. Speaking in the latest issue of Famitsu, translated by VGC by contributor Robert Safazen, the developer said that the team has had to reassess the audience Final Fantasy was appealing to. I'm from a generation that grew up with command and turn-based RPGs, Yoshida said. I think I understand how interesting and immersive it can be. On the other hand, for the past decade or so, I've seen quite a number of opinions saying I don't understand the attraction of selecting commands in video games. This opinion is only increasing, particularly with younger audiences who do not typically play RPGs. Imran, what is the state of turn-based combat? It's pretty much not going to happen anymore for big games like this, right?
Define big. For Final Fantasy, no. I think for Final Fantasy, it's probably over. The most we're probably going to get is that hybrid battle system that FF7 Remake had.
Yeah, yes, right.
But like Dragon Quest, I would argue Square Enix considers that themselves as big a game as Final Fantasy 16. That game is never going to lose its turn-based system. Hori kind of joked around it, but he directly said after that first reveal, no, we're not losing turn-based. That's still there. There have been successful turn-based games recently. Octopath is turn-based. Live Alive is turn-based, and that is a very good video game.
Yes, it is. I've been enjoying it.
Bravely Default 2 is turn-based. Like their turn-based is never going away. But I think for Final Fantasy, considering how AAA that game is, there is a contingent of people that is significantly large that will always go, I don't understand these like very good graphics and set pieces and all that with a game where you stand around and wait to attack. And
yeah.
I've never.
Do you think that the like Final Fantasy 7 RPG or remake was like it sold like 5 million copies? I don't know how much it did since Interlude or Integrate or whatever.
7 million.
Yeah, that's like that's good, but that's like I think I was expecting way more from those. Right. Do you think that
15
maybe
sold 10?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that maybe the impression that people had of like, oh, Final Fantasy VII was that old turn-based RPG? Do you think that held it back, or is there some other thing happening here I'm not thinking about?
I think for 7 Remake specifically, it was a combination of coming out at a very awkward time of the pandemic when people had already bought Animal Crossing and were not ready to go buy like a big AAA game.
That's a good point.
Also, I think people saw the words remake, heard it was only Midgar, and were like, well, I'm just going to wait for all of it to come out. People didn't really understand what that game was, especially because they hid what that game really is for pretty much the entire game. I personally love it. A lot of other people saw that like, this is some Kingdom Hearts bullshit. But also, if we're going to talk some like breaking news, or not breaking news, from what I have heard, that game, they were not quite sure what the full production schedule of all of those games were going to be. They were very encouraged by the initial sales to the point where I heard it was going to be 4 games, with the first 3 being the actual story of FF7 and a 4th game being completely off the rails. Judging by what they've shown so far, they've gone back on that idea. So maybe they were expecting it to just keep selling, and it did not actually do that. I don't think it has to do with the battle system. I think that battle system is actually fucking fantastic.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's got a great. I enjoyed it, and I was going into it like not sure if I would like enjoy that, but I'm like, this feels so fantastic. But it's like I just wonder if the impression people had before they actually played it might have carried over. But I think you're probably right. That's actually not the issue here.
I think what's most likely is in the market going forward, you look at publishers and developers will look at turn-based games or turn-based battle systems as games that have a ceiling of about or probably less than 10 million. Like we're talking about that 10 million milestone. These are games that probably are never going to supersede that milestone.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We look at there's still potential for them to be extremely successful. Like we talk about Persona 5 as one of the most successful RPGs out there, but it's a game that has sold less than 10 million. It is a turn-based battle system. It is never going to like it will eventually probably crawl over that line in some form, but it's like Nier Automata, not turn-based, has sold about the same amount. We don't consider that one of the most successful RPGs of all time. We consider it like a very successful game. So there's a lot of perspective and degrees you need to really think about here. Yakuza is continuing to be a turn-based battle system that is also going to be like in this weird space where that game is never going to do more than 10 million, and they're fine with that. So they can just go, we're going to make it this weird thing that's not an action combat system anymore, because even in an action combat system, it was never going to supersede that mountain.
Yes.
So they think FF16 might, and so they're going to go hard on as many crowd-pleasing structures as they can.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's. I want to touch on this one. I put in the news, but I decided let's move down to the catch up because there's just a little bit I wanted to touch on here. Jason Schreier on Twitter kind of was like responding to people who said the next Assassin's Creed was going to take place in an Aztec setting. That's not what I heard. And then he went on to say that it's going to take place in Baghdad, which ashamedly, I was a student in a U.S. school system, so I'm pretty sure that's right next to where I heard it was going to take place. I heard it was going to be set in Jerusalem. I'm like, oh yeah, they're neighbors. They're right next to each other. So that sounds right. Basically, it's going to take place in the Middle East. And I've also heard that Assassin's Creed Rift is what it's called, should be more like older Assassin's Creed games instead of the more RPG ones of late. And they are working on another thing that could come out after Infinite. Is that what the Infinite is? That what the
Yeah, I was about to ask. That was the last time, because they announced Infinite. They actually said like, "Hey, we're working on this thing," and then there were no details ever again. Right. So, is Rift set to come out before that, or is Rift a game after? Okay.
Rift is coming out before that. Then we should get Infinite. And then the thing I heard about with them working on another thing, I don't know if this is part of Infinite or something that comes out later, but it should be more like an RPG. And I mean, I feel like this is like a cliche at this point, but I'll just say it. I've heard Japan. I mean, God, every time everyone's like, where's the next Assassin's Creed game take place? Japan. Well, and I think that this rumor comes around every time.
They do that on purpose.
Yes.
They leak Japan every single time.
Right.
I talk to Ubisoft people who have been like, oh yeah, I've heard Japan too. Like, I'm like, you're lying. You know it, because it's never been true when you said it.
Yes, it's never.
Also, Bloomberg made in the note that like it's going to be a more traditional Assassin's Creed game. Like, I suspect Ghost of Tsushima is like somewhat influential on, you can go back to the old stuff and it will still, again, another game that crossed 10 million. Like, it will still succeed by being more of a traditional Assassin's Creed style, like older game kind of thing.
Well, I mean, and we talked about Capcom earlier having the multiple pathways of Resident Evil. Like, there is the remakes, and then there's the new first person tier. And it would be nice, I think, for Ubisoft to try to, stagger out Assassin's Creed games so they can have like the two different kinds of Assassin's Creed games. I don't know how they do that with Infinite, but whatever, that's their problem. They can figure it out. Yeah. Okay. I told chat before we started I might take some questions. I'm going to hit this button. Imran, I don't know if you're going to hear this, but it's just a second. Let's play the yummy music. There you go, everybody. All right, GrubbSnax within a game mess morning. Let's go ahead and answer this one from Zcrits. I want to bring this up because you were kind of talking a little bit about this, Imran. If Final Fantasy VII Remake is 3 parts, will the Golden Saucer be in part 2 or part 3? Do you have a guess there?
I would guess. So I'm trying to remember the actual FF7 in my head. It's going to probably be in part 2. I think it'll probably be like a major part. Because like you have to have the stuff. I suspect where that game will go is to the City of the Ancients. And I'm not going to say until the Era thing, because I personally don't think the Era thing is going to happen. I think they're going to change that up. But I think that's roughly where that thing is going to go. Then part 3 will be the rest of the game.
Yeah, that sounds right. Let's see. Nocto Vegas asked, what's the best burrito in Denver? During the pandemic, we stopped going to places. So like I kind of like lost track of stuff. But there are some good places in downtown Denver that I can't remember the name of right now, but definitely look into it because there's a lot of people who take a lot of pride on their burritos in Denver. It's not quite as good as like the scene in SF, but it's still pretty good. Wandy asks, I'm getting a brand new LG C1 OLED next week. What games do you recommend to really show it off? I've been having a lot of fun on my OLED Switch playing the HD 2D Live Alive. and it looks really, really good on that screen. So maybe an HD 2D game. Maybe go play the Live Alive demo. I don't know. What do you have any recommendations there, Imran?
Ratchet and Clank Rift
That is
Apart.
a good one. That is a good
That
one.
game looks great. If you play it in the 40 FPS, or I think there's the VRR mode now. In the C1 support VRR. You definitely want to try that. I know Horizon Zero, or not Zero Dawn, Forbidden West is going to, or already does support VRR. Basically, try VRR on that thing. It looks really good. Anything VRR and oh god, I've totally blanking on the term that makes colors pop.
HDR.
HDR, yes.
Yes.
Anything VRR and HDR, which is a lot of acronyms,
Yes.
is going to like look and feel really good on the TV and be like, holy shit, this feels like I'm playing this on a PC on a gaming monitor.
Then you can get that Wolfenstein Youngblood and try out VRS, which is different than VRR. There's a whole bunch of acronyms you can get into that one. Also, if you have a PC with an NVIDIA GPU, it supports full G-Sync, and that's basically, it's the same thing as VRR, but like a slightly improved. That's worth setting that up, because that's it's not so much about like it's not having the screen tearing, which of course you don't want screen tearing, but if it's at a high enough frame rate, it's hard to see screen tearing. It's all about that jitter. That jitter just goes completely away, and whether it's going 40 frames per second or 80 frames per second, it's just going to look smooth. VRR is really magical. All right, yesterday we asked, when Konami brings back Metal Gear Solid games, will you play/replay any of them? And 64.1% of respondents said yes, 35.9% said no. Imran, do you like, they kind of said, like, explicitly they still intend to bring these games back to services. Do you think they're going to do anything extra to them? And if they do or don't, do you have any plans to touch on any Metal Gear Solid games?
I have heard in the past they're exploring remakes. That's like the most logical thing to do, because you can't have anyone really make new ones, because they're going to be, whether they're good or not, people are going to hate them, which probably deserved. But also, if they do remakes and they do remake 3, which I feel like they have been kind of poking around for years now, like I would love to replay 3. Like 3 is I think Metal Gear Solid 3 is not only the best Metal Gear Solid game, which not necessarily in terms of like all aspects, because 5 plays better, 4 also plays better.
Right.
But in terms of overall package, 3 is my favorite. But also it is the game that I feel like needs the most attention in the audience, because I feel like it's the one that gets ignored the most. Everyone talks about 1, 2. People for various reasons talk about 5. 4 was the end of the trilogy, or not trilogy, end of the series, quote unquote, end of the timeline. But like 3 is the one that I think is the best and just does not get enough attention. And I think it's also probably the easiest one for them to remake and modernize by honestly just making a few UI changes.
How does that 3DS version work? I always kind of wanted to play that on 3DS.
So let's say you were playing it on an emulator that's not actually 3DS,
sure.
It's really good, because it does not. But if you're playing it on an actual 3DS, it suffers from the hardware performance. It's okay. So the damnedest thing, that game did not run very well at launch. Nothing. That game never got an update. After like a very basic 3DS, we did a stability update kind of thing. A couple of different Konami games started running better. So like the 3D Castlevania that
so like an update from Nintendo. You're saying an update from Nintendo for the system itself. Weird.
Yeah, I remember being like, I tested all those games, like these actually run quite a bit better. Like MGS3 was one of them. The Lords of Shadow 2D game ran better.
Right.
Like it was very strange, and no one's ever been able to explain it to me. No one at Konami's ever been able to explain it to me. But it still doesn't run great. But I would say that if you were to play, if in absence of those digital games coming back or them remaking the game, if you wanted to remake or replay MGS3, that is probably the best version.
Okay. I do want. I never played. I love Metal Gear Solid 1. I didn't play 2 because I found out the character changed, and I have this weird hang up about weird loyalty where I didn't even play Donkey Kong Country 2 because I couldn't play as Donkey Kong. I'm broken in the brain. So I want to go back and play 2 and 3 and 4. I played 5, and I really love 5. So I'm like, I should go back and play all those games. All right, let's do the poll for tomorrow. Will there ever... Capsule, let me fix that. Will there ever be another mainline Final Fantasy with turn-based combat? I think Imran's probably right on that one. Probably not, but that doesn't mean that we're never going to see big games without it again. I think I generally agree with what you said there. Game S mornings. There we go. Let me hit the pull button. Yes, no. And we will get to this tomorrow, everybody. Imran, where can people find you on the internet?
You can, not this month, but regularly find me on fanbyte.com with my writing. If you wanted to find me on Twitter, where I'm spending much more time this month, it is at ImranZOMG.
All right. And then let's see what's coming up on Giant Bomb. We have Unprofessional Fridays today. I think we're going to run a power wash, like multiplayer thing on Xbox during that time. We're setting that up. Going to try to get a bunch of people in there. And then I think I'm going to try to. I have discovered a Terminator game called Skynet. Someone sent it to me, made by Bethesda in the 90s, a first-person shooter that I don't remember even ever hearing about. Like, I don't even remember seeing ads for it or anything like that. So I'm going to see if I can get that up and running, and then maybe I'll play that on UPF. We'll see. All right. With that, until the next morning mess, you all are the best audience in gaming. I really appreciate it. Have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.